Hello and welcome to this first episode of Mind the Gap for 2022 with me, Tom Sherrington, and Emma Turner. Hello, Emma.
Hello. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. Yeah, so we're excited. This is the show of the year. We've got some really good guests coming your way, and we had an amazing run of Mind the Gap last year. We were quite surprised by how many people actually listened to this. So thank you very much for joining in and for keeping watching. So in the last episode, we spoke to Peps McRae, which is fantastic. But actually, he was one of lots of really amazing people and events and books and things that we talked about. So what we thought we'd do to start off, to almost celebrate how many different people there are and things happening in the education world, to sort of talk through some of our sort of hits from last year, the things which we were interested in that caught our attention, and just go through them just as a kind of whistle-stop tour of the kind of the world that we're celebrating. So that's the format of this particular episode. Emma and I are going to take it in turns to tell you about stuff that we thought was fab in 2021. So Emma, I'm going to kick off with you. What's your first item?
My first item isn't really a book, really, and it's kind of a slight detour, is that before we start talking about the people that have written the books and run the events and done whatever, I just think the people that should get the biggest thank you and well done for 2021 are the people who are in school, on the ground, who have completely turned up every day with care, compassion and courage, and just kept the whole system ticking along. So we are going to talk about some people who are based in school, some people who aren't based in school, but my first kind of champions of 2021 are the people who are staffing our schools, supporting our children, serving our communities day in, day out, who've just done the most sterling job. So thank you so much, first of all, to the people on the ground who are propping the system up during these testing times, Tom. But
Here. I mean, that's just, we have to echo that strongly. It's sort of, I suppose it's silly, isn't it, to say it goes without saying, but it does need to be said. So,
it does need to be said. And to be perfectly honest, I would stand on my doorstep and clap for a year for schools at the moment. I really would, because I don't think that there's been the credit given to the people who have shown up day in, day out and kept the whole system going. So we are going to celebrate things that have happened necessarily around in the wider system. But my number one this year are the people who've turned up, shown up and put in that day's graft in school. So thank you so much to those people first and foremost. But my hit book of the year is one, it's a little known one, but it appeals to the geek in me. It's the book Thinking Deeply About Primary Mathematics, John Catt, by Kieran Mackle. And I read this and just fell deeply in love with it, to be very honest. It's the handbook for teaching primary maths. And as a primary maths specialist, this was my absolute undiscovered gem of 2021. It was only out fairly recently, but for anybody working in primary or anybody who's got any interest in teaching mathematics, Kieran Mackle's Thinking Deeply About Primary Maths is a winner for me.
Why do you like it so much? Is it just the examples he uses, or the way he explains things? I mean, what is it about it that you think is so good?
It's so comprehensive in terms of he explains it in a really simple way. So for a non-specialist teacher, he really unpicks how maths is actually structured and then how to teach it. So you get kind of the theory of the subject and the understanding of the subject alongside practical things to actually deliver in your classroom that make sense and are doable. And the way that he threads it all together, and he threads in all the things about fluency and automaticity and problem solving, and doesn't do it in a kind of fluffy, airy-fairy way. It's really practical, really simple, really hard-hitting. And I think that anybody that picks it up, deeply impactful, absolutely brilliant. And still based in school as well. So hats off, Kieran, an absolute winner.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. So hopefully we'll be talking to him at some point during this year. So yeah, so it's a top tip. And it's not a book I've read yet, partly because when I see books that are quite specialised, I just think, maybe it's not something which I need, but I'm now going to get that because of your recommendation.
If you want to understand what mathematics is about and how to teach it really well, Kieran's absolutely nailed it for me. Completely nailed it.
Can't. In fact, it's one of the things I bang on about all the time. Is I find one of my most recent blog posts on my own blog was about FE maths resit classes and how amazing it is that students have got that far and still can't do some simple things. And it needs to be taught well right from the beginning. So anything which is dealing with that from the root is great.
Yeah, and I think that anybody who's working with children or students or even young adults who are really still struggling with the basics of maths, that would be a really good book to go and have a look at in terms of how it's put together in terms of its fundamentals. So thank you, Kieran. That's made my year. How about you, Tom?
Okay, so my first pick for 2021 is kind of partly the thing itself, but also what it symbolises, and that was, and I'm going to show it on the YouTube channel, the program for the National Conference of Research Ed. And the reason I picked that first is because for me it was great that it was a live event and that people could come together. So there was a kind of feeling of relief at having fun and be able to do that after all the lockdowns. But it's also just, for me, just a great celebration of so many other things that feed into it. All the researchers themselves, obviously, the people implementing those ideas, and the whole sort of discourse that happens around it. And Tom Bennett and Elaine, who support and run Research Ed, that's all their endeavours. But just being there on that day, I just felt it was just brilliant to just see some new people who I've never seen before, and all the kind of chats around, people talking to me all the time. And I just thought it was wonderful to have this sort of place where researchers, teachers, people who think and talk about teaching outside of it are all coming together, this melting pot. And just some of the ideas that are being shared in the sessions themselves are just really interesting. And of course, there are lots of teachers who can't and don't go to the Research Ed event, so it's not the only place by a long way. But there's something about it which I just think captures the spirit of the whole profession, really thinking these things through. And every time I go to one of those events, I just think it's so brilliant that it happens, but also that it is striking to me that those things didn't used to happen. Like there was decades of my teaching where there was no event like that to go to. So the fact that it's now part and parcel of the thing that we miss it so much when it was shut down. Anyway, so I could go on about it, but it was an amazing event. And the fact that it's now sort of back on track, and there've been some other in-person ones and remote ones still going on, and a calendar ahead, it's pretty exciting.
That was my first one I'd ever been to, that one in London.
Yeah.
I made my debut this year. Didn't speak at it, but just went because I'd never been to one. So it was an interesting induction to the whole Research Ed scene, because it was like the first one after the pandemic, and I think the atmosphere was lovely, and that everybody was so relieved, like you say, to be together and to start sharing expertise. It was really interesting. The program
is so big. I mean, you could probably pick, I think I worked out the maths of it, that there was something, I mean, it's in the millions or even more. I can't remember the permutations. I think there was millions of possible days you could have, depending on which
wow.
Session each time. So, of course, you can only go to one session each slot. Mm-hmm. But because there are so many, like 10 or 12 or 15 and some slots at once, so you have to be, it's quite selective. And there's so many people who are there's a nucleus of people who have been to right back to the very first one, who keep going, people like me. But there's just so many people each time who are new faces, who are presenting for the first time. And I just think that's wonderful.
What I thought was really interesting, there was like you said, the range, but there was some really kind of generic stuff, but there was some really specific sessions as well. I'm just thinking about one, there was a one about A-level economics and a specific way of teaching in an A-level economics class. And I just remember thinking that is really niche, but really brilliant that it's got that platform to be able to talk about something with, and apparently the session was obviously attended by all A-level economics teachers. And I don't imagine you get very many places where people who work in such a kind of niche environment get together and talk about their specific subject. I found that absolutely fascinating, the spread from big whole set generic stuff right through to that kind of really specific subject focus. It was fascinating to see the programme, really fascinating.
Yeah, so great. So what's your next selection?
On a very neat segue, I met in person for the first time at Research Ed the lovely Hailey Hughes, who wrote Mentoring in Schools. So my next pick is her book, Mentoring in Schools. Not only is it a brilliant book, but because it supports the national rollout of the ECF and all of that, but I just think that all of her work around raising the status of mentoring as a way of developing professionals in school is such a hugely important body of work that she's really highlighted through her book and through all of the work that she's doing at university level, at national level, and through her writing and blogging and what have you. I just think she's doing a sterling job in making people recognise that mentoring is such a brilliant lever for professional development, and then adding the research and the rigour around the why it's so important, and then the how to do it as well, and how to do it really well. So Hailey's book, Mentoring in Schools, How to Become an Expert Colleague, is definitely one of my highlights of the year. She's just done such a brilliant job there, and is an absolutely fabulous person as well. Such an icon.
She's a great character, and we enjoyed talking to her hugely. So I agree. And in fact, it's one of my favourite jobs that I've done this year was, well, a couple of times now where I've been in the school talking to the people who I'm talking to are mentors. So it's like the fact that they're gathered together is because they're mentoring people in the early career teacher program, and talking about what that's like, how to do it. And what I loved also is that, you know, quite recently, just before Christmas, observed some lessons and was talking about how great some of the teaching was. And I didn't know this teacher was an ECT. In fact, it wasn't in my mind while I was observing her. And then the person who picked that up was her mentor, and he'd been working with her on her questioning techniques. And he was like really chuffed that, like, his work was coming through. And you think, well, it does, you know, you're mentoring someone, they're teaching better because of that. And that's a pretty rewarding salute to feel is closing. And it's such an important role. And normally often on a kind of, you know, not quite enough time for it, and people really have to really give it their all to kind of make it work in the sort of constraints that exist. Yeah, so Hailey was great to meet, and that's a great thing. So next thing for me, we've got to crack on. We've got so many things. A big thing for me last year was Doug Lemov in a number of different ways. I mean, so three things about Doug Lemov. First of all, we got to interview him, which was wonderful, and he's so passionate, and he was talking from his sort of snowy house in Albany, or I think he lives, but he was just so sort of intensely passionate about the purpose for doing what he does, writing Teach Like a Champion and working with Uncommon Schools. I just found that quite moving, really, how sort of sincere he is about that and the reason why he does what he does. So that was the first thing. Just that interview with him, I just thought was fantastic. The second bit was I went on a training that he sort of hooked me up with Uncommon Schools for how to do remote learning. So I was like, it went in as a participant, and I just learned so much to refer to it indirectly, lots, not just because of remote learning, but some of the ways they did the training and how precise they were and the way that they used video. And I just thought it was really supremely well done. And the third thing, I'll now turn to my shelf here.
I know what you're going to get.
the TLAC set, and I have them here. So this, TLAC 1 and 2, have been out. But last year, Teach Like a Champion 3.0 came out, and it's just really great. So Doug, which he told us about it in our interview, but he's basically changed some of the language. He's tried to finesse some of the language and make it more about the changing the students' attitudes and their mindsets, not just about routine. Although that's not a slideshow, but it's, again, you can see his reflective nature coming through, and I still feel like it's one of the best, it's the best book that helps teachers in a practical way deal with some quite challenging scenarios. So for me, Doug Lemov was like a star for us on this program last year. But all those three things, I just thought, yeah, it's so great to have him. He's so interested in what goes on in England as well. So it's great to have him part of the whole community of people. And I've always got huge respect for everything he does. And that's just one of the things he does.
I was so surprised when we interviewed him about what his personality was like as well. I was genuinely stunned. I thought he was going to be this big, bolshy, and he wasn't at all. He was so gentle and so kind of mild-mannered, and he was just such a nice chap. And he wasn't at all like I thought he was going to be. So I just warmed to him immediately because he's so personable. And like you say, it comes across in the way that he speaks, how much he loves working with children and young people and getting great teachers in front of those young people. And that's what drives him. It's not necessarily about selling books or whatever. It's actually he genuinely cares about having great people in front of young people, in front of kids.
Part of that representation comes through this idea that the sort of routines and systems and protocols and things are kind of inherently, I don't know, repressive or kind of stymieing. And actually, when the spirit that Doug presents it and which you can take it is that they're kind of liberating. Once you've got children who can do this and that, well, look at what they can do. And anyway, so I feel like, and of course you have to apply it to your context. You don't just say do it just like this, but the idea is you can adapt them. I go to so many schools where it's the main thing that everyone uses, and you can see why, because it's so accessible and transferable. So big.
It was a revelation when I spoke to him. It was an absolute joy, and he's such a knowledgeable, wise, gentle soul as well. I absolutely loved talking to him. It was brilliant. Ready for the next one?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, you might want to tear your own skin off and run away, Tom.
Okay. Oh my God, that sounds bad. Oh no. I can't believe you did that.
You didn't know I was going to do this. I can't not mention the walkthroughs, because if we're talking about impactful books and things that have had real influence across the sector, can't do this session without mentioning the walkthroughs that you and Oliver have put together, because every tweet I see, every piece of CPD that's going on in schools across the country, it seems to be, it's like all roads lead to Rome, all CPD at the moment in some way leads to walkthroughs and instructional coaching. So I know from my own trust and from the work that we've done in our 15 schools, what an impact working with walkthroughs has had. And I know on the skit that I work with and all of the other schools and trusts that I work with, they are all using walkthroughs. So if we're going to do a roundup of brilliant things that have happened in 2021, then we have to mention walkthroughs, because it's not just national, it's international. And like Doug's book, it is changing practice everywhere. So I think it's a huge congratulations to you and to Oliver. And you didn't know I was going to say this because your face, you're slowly dying. I can't not mention it, Tom.
If you told me, I would have said not to, but I can't pretend I'm absolutely chuffed to bits that you include that. It means a lot to me. So I really am. I'm properly chuffed. So it's fascinating to me. Like it's sort of thing that feel like. So when I first met Oliver, he had this idea that the ideas are there. That we don't. We some of the ideas will come from him and me, but most of them are ideas that are in the system. And what we've tried to do is like curate them and present them. And his idea was that, to get to the point where it's like a utility where the ideas are represented in this format for everyone, and why wouldn't you have them, kind of thing? Because they're just because it's then you then get to use them and do stuff with them. And we are finding it's sort of taking off. So we're thrilled, and we just in the finishing stages of volume 3 coming together, and we've got some fantastic contributors to that, including you. So it's great. I mean, you've written some brilliant stuff in there about writing, for example, and so there's a lot more stuff. There's walkthroughs in there on play and creativity and writing and assessment. There's so many things. So we've tapped into the profession. So more guest writers in volume 3, including Peps McRae, Sonia Thompson, Mary Myatt. So a lot of the people we've had on this have also written walkthroughs. Adam Boxer has written one. I mean, the list is so many. Yeah, so honestly, I'm thrilled that you mentioned that.
Well, I can't not really, because it's one of the biggest books, biggest series I've seen, and it is genuinely having impact. So thank you, Tom, and thank you, Oliver, for doing that, because you have codified teaching for a lot of people, which has saved.
Well, I don't know now quickly before I get too more embarrassed by that.
Okay, move along now. Nothing to see here.
Okay, the next person I want to celebrate is Dan Willingham. So for me, like these are the two big hitters of Doug Lemov and Dan Willingham in terms of really influencing teacher practice. Of course, there's Dylan William as well, but there are actually three big hitters. But I'm actually going to talk about Dan because he for me he made a big impact in 2021 in my world for a couple of reasons. One of them is that he published Why Don't Students Like School 2.0. So here we go. Here's the first one. Here's the second one, and it's a kind of it's got an extra chapter about technology, which is a useful one, and he's added some extra kind of clarifications. And at the end of each chapter, compared with the first edition, he's got a lot more technical references and notes for teachers and so on. And it's just, I mean, we saw here, and he sort of tweaked it, but largely it's the same as the first book. So for me, one of the big things is to keep reminding people how useful it is. And if you've never read it, and actually, when I go to a training day, I have my standard materials that I use, one of my standard questions is, okay, let's talk about the memory model and why don't students like school? Who's read it? And it's not that many usually. It's like it's because it doesn't have the kind of teach like a champion, here's a sort of toolkit aspect. It's such an important book, and I feel like I reference it constantly. So the fact that came out, and I really think the fact that I think I mentioned Dan Willingham in every talk I ever do. So I feel like he's with me in my head. And I saw him do a great presentation as part of an event called Shift Happens in May. And he used this phrase, which was to do with understanding being the capacity to explain. And I thought that was really interesting. So sometimes people find it hard to distinguish between knowing something and understanding it. And he was saying, well, if you can explain it, it means you can understand it. And that's such an obvious thing to say. But like a lot of obvious things to say, it just makes so much sense. I just thought, boom. And last bit is links to that. So our friend and partner, Nimish Ladd, who wrote this superb book for the In Action series last year, which is about the Marge model. So the Marge model of learning, which is by Arthur Shimomura. So Arthur Shimomura, who wrote the Marge book, he died. He died in October 2020, and you know, and he'd been ill, but he was someone that Nimish had been in contact with, and Art was amazing. He was so chuffed that Nimish had contacted him and saying, "Oh wow, someone's going to write a book about my work," and he was really thrilled. But then we came to do the forward, and because Art hadn't contacted Nimish, I mean, that's how we knew he'd found out that he died, because he hadn't been in contact for a while. So we contacted Dan Willingham, who was the person who first shared Shimomura's work on, you know, who put it on Twitter and told us about him and so on. And it turns out that he'd met him at a conference, and he wrote the forward for Nimish's book, and it's really lovely about Nimish and the book, but also it's a touching story about so it was like, for me that just really neatly we're in this sort of world of cognitive scientists like Arthur Shimomura, Dan Willingham, and they have their world that they have, but the fact they communicate with teachers, not directly always, but through someone like Nimish, I just thought this is brilliant. So that was a really lovely kind of meeting of roads through the In Action books.
Oh, fantastic. Nimish's book, when we interviewed Nimish, I absolutely love talking about that, because Nimish, in there, his In Action bit is all the way through the sector, isn't it? It's got foundation stage, key stage 1, key stage 2, but it's not just sort of this works in his context, which is sort of secondary science. It's actually, this is how it works for everybody. And I loved interviewing Nimish, and I loved that book. And it made me smile then when you said about Dan, Doug and Dylan in all of your training.
I know.
I wanted to go snap. It's like bingo. It's like, oh, there's the Dylan William quote, and bang, there's the Doug Lemov quote. Right.
Okay, let's have your next one then. What was your next treat from 2021? Oh, nice. The Extended Mind.
Extended Mind, Power of Thinking Outside the Brain by Annie Murphy Paul. So totally spun everything I thought about thinking on its head. Was an absolutely brilliant read. It's not written necessarily for education, but it has so many applications for education from reading it. And it's so rich in terms of research. In fact, I thought I was partway through the book and I'd still got loads to read. And I thought, gosh, this is going to be a very long book. And then I realised that entire bit, probably about a sixth of the book, is just the references from the documents that she's used. It's absolutely unbelievable in terms of how rich it is in terms of research. But it was so refreshing to read because it talks about learning in so many different ways. It talks about how we learn, not just by the things that we think, but by the things that we do, by the way that we interact with people. And it's Oliver Caviglioli recommended it, and he said, when you read it, you will feel seen. And I thought, well, he first told me that, I thought, what on earth are you on about, Oliver? And then I read it and I kept having to sort of throw it down and go, oh my goodness, he was absolutely right. That does look like teaching. That does look like learning. And it's what it brings to life is some of the things that you inherently know, especially as a teacher of very young children, but you haven't been able to articulate why it is that happens. It kind of gives the science and the background to the things that you know and you feel as a teacher of especially younger children. So it's been an absolute thrill to read it and completely mind-blowing in terms of the research that underpins it as well. So very exciting read for me, that one.
And the way that you and Oliver talks about it all the time. So obviously he's my other great part of working life. So I hear about it constantly. So he's a big fan. And I know that you and Oliver and David Goodwin are writing an inaction book, or it's a book anyway about the inaction. That kind of practice. So, for me, I'm really looking forward to reading that because I think what I've picked up from the Extended Mind is it kind of gives a rationale for things that you kind of experience. But
that's it.
I'm not sure yet. Kind of like, so what does that mean? I do with it, or are there things I can do differently because I know about this? So I'll be looking to hear.
And it's interesting as well because there's lots of things that you do in your practice that you think, I don't quite know why I do this or why it works. It just does. And what does is give you the name and the kind of the handle and the peg to hang it on to say, oh, that's why it works. So there's stuff in there that's new and different, but there's also an awful lot of stuff that's reassuringly familiar in terms of, oh, that's why that works. It's because of that. There's that element of it as well. So really exciting to work with Oliver, to work with David on trying to make that relevant and accessible to teachers. So exciting time, but the most mind-blowing book I've written.
That's really fantastic.
Read. What's your next one then, Tom?
Okay, well, another person who I really enjoyed engaging with last year was Jeffrey Boakye, who for me was a bit of a thrill to talk to him actually, because he's someone who in 2020 produced Blacklisted, which is I mean, it might have come out the year before, but when the Black Lives Matter stuff happened in 2020, and then people were sort of saying, people need to start reading about Black perspectives on culture and society in a way which he just kind of maybe paying lip service to, and I kind of read quite a few books in 2020, and one of them was Blacklisted, which really blew my mind. I mean, just hearing him talk about the experience of being a Black British person and the terminology. So for me to then in 2021, a couple of things. First, we invited him to be in the curriculum masterclasses, which he did. And then he also did a talk for the EduGive conference, which you and I co-hosted, which was, I mean, that's another thing. That wasn't even one of my picks, but that was pretty exciting. But Jeffrey's talk there and the one he did for the curriculum masterclasses, both of them were just really strong and left me feeling, there's a kind of, I just was totally captivated. So he has a sort of energy of sincerity and commitment, and he kind of comes back from the camera and it's just like bam, and he just like hits you with this like message. You think, wow, and you can see him. He's working at a comprehensive school in Yorkshire with the kids, and he's telling them all about perspectives on literature and so on. He's an English teacher, and I just love the whole sort of energy he brings to teaching, and he talks about bringing yourself to it. You can't separate yourself from the material you're communicating, and he gives a voice to that. And aside, next to that, he's also becoming a bit of a broadcaster and writer outside of education, which is quite exciting to watch, his star rising. And he published this book last year called Musical Truth, which is just absolutely fantastic. Oh. You've got it.
I got it too. It's brilliant.
It's great you haven't really properly planned this, because it's a snap, isn't it? And it's just, I love it. So it's he's chosen a whole bunch of tracks which kind of tell the story of kind of black music and sort of late 20th century history, I suppose, and into this century through the musical tracks of his childhood and his family and so on. And so he laces it with sort of references and talking about anti-racism in so many different ways. And then there's a Spotify playlist where you can play all the tracks. So I just love it. I mean, it's a concept for a book. It's like, here's some songs which mean a lot to me for these reasons, and then you can listen to it and that's what I did. I had a day where I was playing the song.
I know somebody else who did that, Tom, with their book.
Yeah. Well, yes, you did. Yeah,
I'm just going to check his list now, see when this was put. No, I'm joking.
The subtitle: A Musical History of Modern Black Britain in 28 Songs. It's just fantastic. Okay. And he's got more books coming. And so for me, Geoffrey Boakye is a person to watch for, and great guy, great teacher, and a real joy to sort of have the opportunity to talk to him and listen to him.
That is an absolutely brilliant book. And I've got a stack of Geoffrey Boakye books by my bed at the moment. I'm slowly working through. They're absolutely brilliant, completely brilliant. Right, okay, next person it's not a book, it's a person, and it's somebody who's got quite a senior position within the sector and has throughout the pandemic and throughout everything championed teachers at national level and really supported the profession. And that's Dame Alison Peacock of the Charter College. I think she's done the most amazing job in supporting everybody within the sector and has fought some very difficult corners and fought some very difficult battles on behalf of the profession during the pandemic. And I think that she's just done the most amazing job in keeping everybody's spirits up and making sure that the voice of the profession is heard. And I loved it when we interviewed her as well. So it's a thank you to Dame Alison for everything that she's been doing in supporting and developing the profession during the pandemic and beyond. So thank you so much. That's my recommendation.
The Chartered College is really of teaching, as you're very keen to keep stressing. That's what it is. And you see they're doing these sort of programs and still producing the Impact magazine. But yeah, I think that kind of flag waving for teachers generally has been done by a few people. I always think of her and someone like Jeff Barton and other people who have real sort of prominence as representatives of organisations like that. Have done a good job. But yeah, I think she's really good for that kind of aspect of the voice of the profession for sure.
And the work that the Charter College is doing with like the chartered teacher status as well, that's such a brilliant programme to really keep fantastic teachers in the classroom, but provide them with that next level rigour and qualification and recognition for being a fabulous teacher. We've got somebody in our trust who's done the chartered teacher programme and got chartered teacher status, and it was the most rigorous, intense programme I've ever seen in terms of classroom teaching. It was absolutely brilliant, and my colleague was saying how wonderful it was and what a great network she'd built as a result of it. But I think that the resources that are posted on the site that you can get access to, and the training courses that are on there and the webinars and things that they do are just such a brilliant resource for the profession. And the work that's going on behind the scenes at the college is is great to kind of keep that going. And I know they've just had their elections recently and appointed a whole new body of folk. So it's just exciting times and so much to tap into there. But,
yeah, I feel like it's sort of it's come a long way since it started, and it's probably, you know, it looks like it's something which is sort of here to stay, which is, you know, wasn't 100% certain at the start. And then for me, I almost feel like I want to create some kind of map of what's going on now. So you've got the Chartered College, you've got the EEF, you've got things like Teacher Development Trust and all these other organisations like the Ambition Institute and people that run all these other programs. And there's almost so many that you feel like, what does everybody do and how does it all link? But that's a good sign of a good profession. And compared with some other countries where they don't have any of those things, we're doing pretty well. And the fact that there's debate about them, I think is good, isn't it? People sort of query them, question them, but there's a kind of energy to that, which I think is excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's your next one?
Okay, well, the next one is I'm going to say is Mary and John. I mean, you might think
I knew you were going to pick that.
It's not. It's a combination of the book Her by Mary Myatt and John Tomsett. And the reason I've picked that is because of what it represents. Again, a bit like the Research Ed. So, I mean, when picking Research Ed, it wasn't just about saying Tom Bennett is an awesome person, which he is. Her isn't just about Mary Myatt and John Tomsett being lovely people who we know. It's what's in it. I mean, it really is profound stuff. So what their book has captured, and it's a fantastic idea, they've basically interviewed a whole group of people who are responsible for subjects and talked about them about the subjects and what their challenges are, what their questions they ask, how they explain the subject to other people. And it's just so densely packed with just this sort of intellectual, enthusiastic, rigorous evaluation of what curriculum means to them. And you know, there's a lot of kind of generic stuff about curriculum. There's a lot of kind of over-theorizing about curriculum. And there's a lot of kind of like overburdened feeling about it. But when you just hear it expressed through the language of people who are just living it and doing it, it just comes alive. And you think, oh, okay, I get that now. So I just think it's a great concept. And the book is really, really great to have. And, you know, I see it all over and it's done really, really well. But it's just what it represents. It represents a whole group, a whole profession, which is really interested in what it's teaching. And the fact that curriculum is so hotly debated all the time, I just think it's fantastic. So 2021 was a big year for that. But I know there's been some kind of like flip round and then a kind of reevaluation of how far do we go with this secondaryization of the primary curriculum, which was a phrase that you introduced me to. I think the primary Her is due out in 2022, and so that's going to be interesting to see that come through so that you've then got the two together will be like a real force. But anyway, so for me that was a really great combination, and it's not indirectly linked. It's not directly linked, but it's indirectly linked to the curriculum masterclasses. So we did 5 events in 2021, and I get to sit there for 2 days in a row and listen to all these very wise people talk about curriculum issues, and it's just an absolute joy. So
a vision of you bathing in curriculum, just wash it, like lap over you.
And I so setting those events up, and so sort of like 10 days of my working life every year, and plan to continue, is just listening to clever people talk about curriculum, and it's really great. So all the people who signed up for those events, and the number of different people who you know, you hear for the first time, alongside the mainstays who are, you know, John and Mary and also Christine Council. So yeah,
it's been brilliant doing the primary interviews with them, because there's me and Leica Sharma and Rachel Higginson who've been doing the interviews with primary colleagues for primary Her. Oh my God, I've learned so much from the people that we have interviewed. So I get off the interview every time and I think, I want my children to come to your school. I've moved house in my head about 10 times to various points in the country just to try and get, you know, just to try and get the access to those professionals. Because our sector, like you say, Tom, is so rich with talent and knowledge and skill and expertise. And it's such an absolute privilege to listen to people talking about their passion as well, talking about the thing that they're hugely knowledgeable about, hugely passionate about, and such with such warmth and genuine love for what they're doing. It's been an absolute treat. So much.
Some of the highlights from me of the masterclasses that we've done, well, even very recently, Christopher Such, but before that in 2021, someone like John Hutchinson or Claire Seeley, and there's a kind of analysis there, which I think, and I think one of the things which I think John Hutchinson really made me see was this sort of this need to link over time. So thinking of, so often you find people planning topics, planning units, isolated, and you did your talk on this for the EduGive was fantastic on this. It was just awesome. This idea that when everything's atomized, you lose the wood for the trees, and you stop seeing how it all connects. And that thing to me was really, really coming through. Like, you've got to build the links as you're building the individual sections. It all adds up to something in kids' heads. And anyway, the thinking that's happening there about starting that up, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, and it has a special form of curriculum thinking, which isn't the same as geography, history, math, science, which is, and I feel that I think that case is coming through really well, actually.
Individual bricks don't make a house, Tom.
That's it. I'm sure there was a food analogy in there somewhere that you had as well. But anyway,
I've gone building today. I've gone away from construction.
Okay, have you got any others? Like what other? We could keep going on, but let's have.
There's a couple of people who I heard speak this year who completely blew my mind. One of them was Evelyn Ford, who won head teacher of the TS head teacher of the year when she spoke about her headship in London. And I just loved listening to her, listening to a real journey of a real head and the passion and wisdom with which she spoke about the role of the head teacher. So it was kind of a heads up to say, if you ever get to hear Evelyn speak or you ever get to go and visit Evelyn's school, is to do that, because it was such a treat to hear her journey and to hear her talk about leadership with such warmth and positivity and knowledge. It was just brilliant. So Evelyn was on my list. So she has published a book. I haven't read it, but hearing her speak was brilliant. So Evelyn's on my list of fantastic highlights of the year for me.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'd love to talk to her. Well, I've got a huge list, but I think I'm going to finish up with mine as I'm going to talk about the fabulous organisation that is Haringey Education Partnership, and again for what they do themselves, but also for what they represent. So it's run by a fantastic woman called Fran Hargrove, who used to be a primary head teacher. And now she runs the School of Good Improvement organisation. Well, she co-runs it with her partner, James. But they basically have set up this school improvement company, which all the schools buy into. And they're working with me with walkthroughs, but also with Christine Council on curriculum. And it's just, they're so ambitious for this stuff. But there's just a network. So it's a great great example of how for me, a kind of non-MAT organisation works in conjunction with MATs and local authority. And the collaboration, the spirit of collaboration between the schools is just epic. It's just absolutely amazing. So you go to an event where you've got a whole group of head teachers come on, different primary schools all over Haringey and Tottenham, Muswell Hill, around me. And I get to talk to all these people. And I go into their schools, I meet the kids, I meet the teachers, I do training with them. And then I talk to the leaders about the challenges. I just think this is just fantastic. There's the dynamism, the energy, the thirst for kind of knowledge, the commitment to the children, and some of the ideas. The innovation. So they've taken like our stuff, but then you hear someone, well, we're doing like this, we're doing it like that. Ideas I'd never thought of because coming out of the system, and I just find that whole thing just massively inspiring. And I just think it's a great sort of way of doing things that they have got this energy. Anyway, for me, that's just great. And I know that I've been to some other places where none of that's there. They're this kind of isolated school which doesn't know who its friends are, and they're just working in their own little corner, and they feel isolated. They say so. And whereas what Haringey Education Partnership has achieved with its community of schools is just wonderful. So for me, that I'm going to finish on them because they mean a lot to me personally. And they contacted me to work with them, but they just round the corner. Essentially, one of the schools is literally just across the fence from near where I live, and it for something. It means a lot to me to be able to work in your own community. There's something about that. So, and when you sort of travel around and you get on the train and you arrive at a school, you you have to sort of tune in to the people and where you are. But to work in your own community and feel part of something, it's just, for me, very exciting. So I'm looking forward to keeping on working with them this year.
Fantastic. And I think that probably epitomises everything that's good about everything we've spoken about that sharing, the collaboration, the kind of shared expertise, shared knowledge, and the kind of common purpose, really, about what we're trying to achieve. Because all of the people that we've mentioned tonight are some of the most generous people I know in education in terms of sharing their expertise and sharing their knowledge. And it sounds like it's being exemplified then in practice in Haringey. Beautiful.
I think it is. And I get to see like the materials that Christine Council and her partner Steve Maston have written in actions like, oh wow. So I'm always telling her that I've seen, and then they see my stuff when they go in. So there's a sort of sense of lots of people supporting them. But yeah. Okay, so I think that's probably a pretty good roundup, and we could probably do a whole other hour just going through this.
We could. I've got loads of people left on my list, but we should leave them for another day.
I think so. So I want to say a massive thank you to Ross, who's in the background there, who does all our techie stuff for us and produces the program and helps us organise everything and keep it going. And we're really grateful to everyone who's watched the videos on YouTube and this dialed into all the kind of podcast platforms. So thank you very much for the support you've given to Mind the Gap. We're looking forward to a year ahead. We've got a whole bunch of guests lined up, which I won't tell you until we announce them, but it's fantastic that this has become a thing that we do. And thank you to Emma for being a great partner on this bookshelf behind us world.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you to everyone listening. So that's the end of this episode of Mind the Gap, Making Education Work Across the Globe, with me, Tom Sherrington, and Emma Turner.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you again very soon.